We have had the introduction to the kingdom Protista, that was the second kingdom with not fixed boundaries. Taxonomic misfits came and settled in that kingdom. Unicellular organisms which were eukaryotic but could not be classified well into fungi, plantae or animalia are put into Protista. What could be a protestant for one scientist? It could be a protestant for, it could be a plantae cell for other reader, or it could be an animal cell for other reader. And I gave you the classic example of protozoans, which certain authors believe are animals, but we are going to consider it under Protista only. Now, we have to see the kingdom characteristics, and let us see what kingdom characteristics are. Just a revision of what we had discussed. First of all, the cells would be eukaryotic. Alright, we remember that. We very well know that they are eukaryotic. They are going to have a well defined nucleus and membrane bound organelles. Okay. The second point is that they are mostly unicellular, so that means they are going to be microscopic, but they are not bacteria. And some are multicellular. Now, over here I want to point out one thing, that when I say multicellular over here, that would not be thalloid organization, because I told you that certain fungi, certain algae and those which are unicellular, they are classified into protistants. The multicellularity over here is that they are working in a colonial sort of form. That is one thing. Every cell would be a single protestant, but they would be working together in a colonial form, and that would be pointing out towards their multicellularity. Then there is a mode of nutrition, and you know that it could be autotrophic in case of the photosynthetic algal forms which are classified into bacteria, like we have chrysophytes and we have the dinoflagellates. You are going to know about them. There are two classes, further groups in this kingdom, which are photosynthetic, and the remaining groups, they could be heterotrophic, that is they are not going to be photosynthetic. So, we have autotrophic and heterotrophic forms, and there is again a class known as euglenoids. Again we will come to that. The euglenoids are both, they could be autotrophic when the conditions are suitable for them, and they would be heterotrophic if the conditions are not suitable. So, like they are either ways, they are going to be autotrophic according to the conditions they would be. And then we talk about the reproduction. They, most of them are, they have sorted to asexual reproduction, while few of them can use conjugation as the means of this reproduction. And you know that conjugation is believed to be precursor of sexual reproduction, because there is exchange of genetic material from one parent to the other, and it is somehow considered as a sort of sexual reproduction, but very primitive. Those organisms which are unicellular, like of these criteria and categories, they are very simple. So, the reproduction would also be very simple. So, conjugation is a sort of sexual reproduction, and the cell wall may or may not be present. There are cases then when cell wall would be present, like in the cases of dinoflagellates, diatoms and rest of the groups, and there are conditions where there is no cell wall, as in the case of those which would be for animal cells for some authors, as I told you the example of protozoans. And then we have a mention that they are taxonomic misfits. Why they are taxonomic misfits? Because I told you the kingdom is not having fixed boundaries. Those which are unicellular, those which fulfill these criteria and do not fit into the proper classification according to the remaining three kingdoms, which are higher in category apart from Monra and Protista, they would be settled into this kingdom, and they contain all eukaryotic cells that can't be classified as plant, animal or fungus. They can be classified, but they cannot be completely classified. So, in case there is any misfitting that is coming and the person is not able to put a particular organism in the given kingdom, it can be put in Protista. Okay, coming to the classifications, let's see what all we are going to have over here in this kingdom. There would be the first thing that you started drawing in your childhood, and first diagram that you had to make, and you did not understand what it was this thing, that was amoeba, something distorted shape, and you said that these are its feet and this is a living organism. We have amoeba, we have euglenoids, we have dinoflagellates, paramecium, diatoms and slime molds. All these are going going to come into this kingdom. And I must tell you this part, this one, Euglena, is photosynthetic and heterotrophic both. As we said that they have both the nutrition modes, this organism is one such which has both. Amoeba happens to be sort of animal cell. Slime molds, they resemble the fungi. When we talk about dinoflagellates and diatoms, they are golden algae and brown algae in the commonest terms. And then we have paramecium, which is a ciliate, again it is an animal. So all these cells which are unicellular are going to be under this kingdom. One by one we are going to understand the groups which we have. The first group in this kingdom is chrysophytes. Okay, there are names for these, there are certain phylums inside these groupings, and we are not going to get to that level. Only thing we have to understand is we have to learn few examples, and we have to learn the general characteristics that a particular grouping has been assigned so that the organism is considered under that group. So the first one is chrysophytes. One by one, whatever I am speaking, pay attention to that and try to learn that and try to associate it what we had understood in the introduction. The example for this is golden algae, and when we call golden algae, we have desmids. The common name is desmids. The example for these is diatoms. These are as the name you can see over here, it is saying algae, that means they would be autotrophic. They would be, earlier they were in the plant kingdom, but later on it was classified in this chrysophytes. One of the most abundant unicellular algae in the ocean. You might have heard about Diatomaceous Earth, you might have heard about the algal blooms that are present in the ocean. There is lot of photosynthesis that is taking place in the oceans. Oceans are the source of photosynthesis, and that photosynthesis is not carried out by the main algae which we have in the plant kingdom. Of course it is carried out, but maximum of that is being carried out by these golden algae, which are the diatoms. It is one of the most abundant algae, yes. It is considered helpful to humans because it is responsible for fixation of carbon dioxide and release of oxygen. They are unicellular. They are found mostly in salt water, so we have marine algae. One of the biggest components of plankton. Now when we say we have so many phytoplanktons in the sea, we are referring to these chrysophytes itself. What are planktons? Planktons are those organisms which, if they are planktons are basically free floating organisms that passively float in the water current. So if it is a plant, it is known as phytoplankton. That means if it is phototrophic or autotrophic, to be very precise, and if it is not if it is heterotrophic, we call it zooplankton. So they are phytoplanktons basically. One of the biggest components of plankton, which is a free floating collection of microbes, eggs and larvae. As I told you, they are planktons. Planktonic form is basically something which is free floating. Now what we have to learn in this is that what is their cell wall made up of, what would be the cell like. So the cell wall is made up of silica. Over here they have mentioned glass. Don't get confused that they are going to have glass. Glass is made up from silica. The raw material for glass is silica. You can say it is sandy. Okay, sand sort of cell wall they have. They have hollow, hard, porous shell called fristule. So inside the fristule there would be present the organism properly. The cell would be present inside that. The food that would be stored inside the cell would be in the form of oil. There won't be any starch storage. We know that because it is phytoplanktonic, so it is going to store starch, but no, in this case it is oil, and it floats at the surface because of this oil. That is why they are planktonic. The floating ability comes to these chrysophytes because of the stored food material in the form of oil. They are able to photosynthesize at surface because the surface is the site where they are going to take the maximum of sunlight. And one thing that they are responsible for formation is diatomaceous earth. Okay, now what is this diatomaceous earth? Pay attention that what was their cell wall made up of? It was made up of silica. When they are going to die, they would settle down. Naturally occurring soft siliceous referring to the cell wall, that is fristule made up of silica, siliceous sedimentary rock that is easily crumbled into fine white to off-white powder, and it is used as diatomaceous earth. It is nothing but the fristules which have settled down, and the leftover fristules used in toothpaste and cleaners, and they are used as grit and oil industry. They are used, diatomaceous earth has a lot of economic importance. So that is what we have to learn in the case of chrysophytes. And the best example that we have over here is, if you can remember these names of the diatoms, that is scientific names Emiliania Hixley and other one is Cyanura. It is a colonial golden algae. As you can see, the color is also referring, this is golden algae. It is found in freshwater lakes and ponds. So you have to, I have taken these two because one is marine and the other one is freshwater. So you have to remember Cyanura is the golden algae which is present in freshwater, and this is the case of golden algae which is having calcium carbonate in its cell wall. Okay, we said that there is silica, over here they are having calcium carbonate in their cell wall. Next we move towards another group. You might have seen this. This is bioluminescent protists that you might have seen either in some picture as over here, or you might have seen it in some sort of movie where there is a romantic scenario or something like that. We see these things in the movies. It is a natural thing. It actually happens. It is not that it is some sort of VFX that is being used. It is a natural thing that on the seashore, that on certain beaches there is a bioluminescent phenomena which is shown, and we have class of Protista which is responsible for this bioluminescence, and that class or the grouping is known as dinoflagellate. Okay, so let us see what are the characteristics of dinoflagellates. They are photosynthetic, so they have chloroplasts with chlorophyll. They are going to be red or yellow or green in their color. Okay, so they have xanthophylls and carotenoids present in them. They have a cellulose cell wall, unlike the cell wall which had, unlike fristule in the case of chrysophytes, which had silica in them. Their segments fit together like an armor. Now over here you have to pay attention that whatever the cell wall they are having, it is like you are wearing a helmet, and the helmet is having an upper cover and a lower cover as well. For that, see this. See this. This is the actual armor that they are having. The entire body is closed inside a sort of a shell, you can say. Before coming to that, let's see other characters. The segments, they fit together like armor and make a proper shell. As you can take the example of whenever a turtle is being intimidated, it gets folded inside its shell, so that shell becomes complete enclosure. In the same way, these dinoflagellates, they have complete enclosure sort of shell around them. They have two flagella, that is why they have the name dinoflagellate. These two flagella are in such an arrangement that you have to remember what that arrangement is. One extends from the middle of the cell. From the right in the middle you will have a transverse flagella, and the second one would be around the middle in the groove, that vibration of which causes the cell to spin. So one would be a transverse flagella, the other would be a longitudinal flagella. Yet again you need to see that this one, the central one, would be transverse and the other one would be longitudinal. Now for spinning, the transverse flagella would be responsible, and for further movement the longitudinal flagella would be responsible. The chromosomes are visible in dinoflagellates inside that particular shell. Some produce toxins, that is in the case of red tide, and the example is goniolox. You might have heard about red tides which occur. Red Sea is given the name because of the red tides which it is having. And what are red tides? There is nothing, someone comes in, adds color to the ocean, it's nothing like that. It is these dinoflagellates, as I told you in the beginning, they have red and yellow pigments. So that yellow organisms, red and yellow organisms, they are present in so much abundance that they give the appearance of the sea happens to be red. Okay, they give a red coloration to the sea appears reddish, and that is known as red tide. And you must keep in mind that this red tide is responsible for certain intoxications of fishes, and it is dangerous for fishes because they are quite toxic for fish, and if somebody consumes the fish who has taken this particular dinoflagellate in so much abundance, the person can also get intoxicated and would be poisoned. And as in the beginning we saw the example of bioluminescence, they produce light. Bioluminescence is the production of light, glowing light, due to some biological reactions inside the body, and dinoflagellates are responsible for that. We have 4 examples. We have glinodinium, we have peridinium, we have gynodinium and goniolox. This one, was responsible for the red tide. Rest of these, this one is responsible for bioluminescence. And why I have used this slide is for making you understand firstly the shell like structure that they have, and secondly for the two flagella that they are going to have. This one comes to be the transverse flagella, and over here they have not shown the longitudinal flagella. You can see over here longitudinal and a transverse flagella. It would be something like a top that you have. Most of you students would be playing that top that you have, or you have that yo-yo sort of toy you must have played in your childhood. You first of all rotate the wire on that yo-yo in the center and then you lose it. That rotation is responsible for giving the rotation that the rotated one is responsible for giving rotation to the yo-yo, while the stretching is responsible for propelling it forward. Same way you can associate that yo-yo, if you have played with it, that yo-yo or a top, that is in the same way they have their motion. They have, I guess somebody who made the top and yo-yo must have taken inspiration from these. So this is all about the dinoflagellates and diatoms, and why we study both of them together. There is a reason that both of them are photosynthetic. They were earlier under the algae, but now they have been put into Protista. They are autotrophic in nature, they are photosynthetic, they are planktonic, most of them are marine, and whatever features we have to study, we have studied about them. Next we deal with that part of Protista which is somewhat close to fungi, but for that you need to see the next lesson.